Welcome to Modern Aikidoist Podcast. This interview with Lenny Sly Sensei on Steven Seagal and Tenshin Aikido went longer than I thought, but we got into some very interesting topics. Due to the length, I've split the interview into two parts. Enjoy. Welcome to Modern Aikidoist Podcast. My sincere thanks to listeners and those who have liked, subscribed, and commented. Your interest is noticed and deeply appreciated. This podcast today is coming from a commenter, and actually I want to thank him. His name is Idan Naor, and I hope I'm pronouncing that properly, but he asked a great question. He says, can you talk about Steven Seagal Sensei and Tenshin Aikido? The reason is that I see a lot of hate towards him in the general Aikido world, which I don't really understand why. For me, he is the reason why I started to train in Aikido in the first place, and I believe that the same is for many others like me. I thought this was a great question, so thank you, Idan, for posting this up. And when I read this, I thought, well, I have my own thoughts about Steven Seagal, but I've never met him. I've never studied in a Tenshin Aikido dojo or other really instructor or have enough exposure to feel like I could speak knowledgeably about it, but I know someone who does. So I'm interviewing Lenny Sly today. I called him up and said, hey, this is right up your alley. And so I wanted to bring him on. So welcome, Lenny, and we've got a few questions, I think, that we can cover to sort of get your take on this. And so maybe to start this out, tell us your background with Tenshin Aikido and your knowledge of Steven Seagal. Kind of just give everybody a kind of a picture of where you're coming from.
Okay. Well, first off, thank you for having me. I really appreciate it, and thanks for considering me for this podcast. My Tenshin Aikido, just like the gentleman that asked the question, and I would have to say it's pretty safe to say there's a lot of people out there in the world that started Aikido because of Steven Seagal, and I am definitely one of them. And, obviously, when Above the Law came out, and I think it was like April or May of 1988, I never saw it in the movie theater. I saw it on video. So once I saw that, and, that opening scene, that was in Above the Law, at an Aikido dojo, I was immediately hooked. And for most of you that don't know this, that scene in Above the Law, the very beginning scene where he's demonstrating Aikido, that was actually filmed at his West Hollywood dojo. That wasn't a movie set. That was actually his real dojo that, he ran, that he eventually made Haruo Matsuoka Sensei the chief instructor, and he did that, I believe, in 1985, and that's when he started pursuing a movie career, was around that time. So technically, from what I've been told and what I've heard, that he retired from actively teaching Aikido as a profession to pursue a movie career, and obviously he did a pretty good job at that, especially like the first 9 movies that that he made were pretty big box office hits to a certain extent. My background with Tenshin Aikido, it's I studied in traditional Aikido for roughly 16 years, and then made a kind of a crossover in 2000 and started training with a gentleman named Larry Reynosa Sensei. And Larry Reynosa, to this day, as far as I know, is his highest ranked student directly under Steven Seagal. He was like one of 2 guys that got a fist on directly from Seagal. Mm-hmm. So eventually he outranked Matsuoka Sensei, because when Larry met Seagal Sensei, I think in 1983, he was a Sandan and he was a student under Chiba Sensei's group. And then he somehow got wind of Steven Seagal coming back to the United States from being in Japan for several years, and he opened up a dojo out here, and I guess he had a seminar of some sort, and Reynosa Sensei got wind of it, sent a couple students there, and they came back saying, oh my God, you got to see this guy's amazing. And however, Reynosa Sensei hooked up with Seagal, however that went down, and the rest is history, I guess. Larry Reynosa just became a direct student of Seagal Sensei. So I trained with Larry Reynosa from 2000 to 2007. It was an interesting time. It was very hard training. It was very demanding. There was a lot of times, you'd get hurt during class because it was serious. It wasn't soft style type stuff. It wasn't about connecting with somebody center. It was really about, applying Aikido in a practical sense. Within that time as well, I trained with Matsuoka Sensei a handful of times, 5, 6 times, 7 times at seminars and whatnot. And around 2002, I went down to St. Louis to Elliot Freeman's dojo Three Rivers Aikido, and I was actually going down there to meet up with a different Aikido instructor that was hosting the seminar, or that was going to be the guest instructor, and it turned out that he couldn't make it, so another guy took his place, and his name is George Angulo. George Angulo has been a direct student of Steven Seagal since 1990, and still to this day, I am a direct student of his. As a matter of fact, I'm one of his senior-most students ever. I have a very good relationship with him. He's not as well known as some of the other guys because he's very low key. He kind of stays on the down low. He's really not about, hey, look at me, I'm a student of Steven Seagal. He would tell people that he's a direct student, but he didn't really promote himself as a way of being a salesman to get people to to be with him as students and whatnot. So my Tenshin Aikido training dates back all the way to 2000. So it's been 19 years that I've been doing this style of Aikido. The term Tenshin Aikido, or the name Tenshin Aikido, people need to understand something, and I'm going to clarify this today. Steven Seagal does not address his Aikido as Tenshin Aikido. He doesn't call it Tenshin Aikido. He doesn't promote it Tenshin Aikido. It's just plain and simple Aikido. That's it. I'm the one that branded Tenshin Aikido 5 years ago when I got on social media, when I started becoming pretty big on YouTube. So I started promoting that as Tenshin Aikido. There's other people out there that have used the term, or used the name, term, whatever have you, Tenshin Aikido within their training and whatnot. Here's the difference, and this is where I see the difference in this. If you've trained with any one of Seagal's first-generation students here in the United States, not the people they trained in Japan, but first-generation students here, Craig Dunn, Larry Reynosa, Haruo Matsuoka, when they were directly linked to Steven Seagal, and you did any type of Dan testing, Shodan, Nidan, Sandan, where any of the three promoted you or Steven Seagal himself promoted you, then you're a qualified Aikido instructor in the so-called name Tenshin Aikido. If you didn't go through that fire, you're not really qualified to teach this. Okay, as far as I'm concerned. Because that Dan testing that I went through was probably the hardest thing I've ever had to do martial art-wise. I actually have a copy of my test on my YouTube channel, Road Warriors TV. It was like a 48-minute long test. It was brutal. It was as serious as a heart attack. I mean, at one point towards the end of the test, I had a broken, dislocated pinky toe on my right foot, and it was right before I was about to do Randori, and Randori is that is the black belt test with this style of Aikido. If you can't pass the Randori, you're going to fail, and they had no problem failing people. And knowing the fact that I had a broken, dislocated toe, I mean, I pointed it out to Reynosa, and Reynosa just said, worry about it later, keep going. Meaning that you're in the middle of a test. You don't have time to buddy tape your foot, buddy tape your toe to your other toe. I can see where he's coming from with that. Obviously I'm not going to have a broken, dislocated toe on the street unless I'm wearing flip-flops, which I never do. So technically on the street you wouldn't have to worry about it. So it's and part of me is that really would have been cool if you would have let me do this, to where I can buddy tape it. And the other part of me is I get it. I get the seriousness behind the actual Dan test. But again, there's guys out there that claim to teach Tenshin Aikido. There's guys out there that claim to be representatives, but directly under Steven Seagal, and they've never taken one of these tests.
So that's a pretty small group then of people that took those Dan tests in that time with those few instructors. Yeah. Would you say that's true? And not all of them are still teaching. Some of them have moved on or are retired or what have you.
Yeah, well, there's people that have moved on. There's people that still teach. I don't really know if I want to mention names.
Sure,
off the top of my head, but there's 2 or 3 guys out there right now that claim to be Tenshin Aikido. And as far as I'm concerned, they don't got a fucking pot to piss in when it comes to that.
Sure.
Okay, I know who they are. They know who I am. I've had conversations with these guys, and the majority of them claim to be 6 dans. 6 dans from who the fuck promoted you to 6 dans? Yeah. How did you get that promotion? Because you sure as hell did not get it from Steven Seagal. Then you sure as hell didn't get it from Matsuoka, Craig Dunn, Larry Reynosa, George Angulo, okay, Elliot Freeman, okay, and these guys claim to be 6 dans. Well, sorry for the profanity, but where the fuck did you get that rank from?
Well, and it's a sad truth that in the martial arts world, you get charlatans who are claiming to have lineage that they didn't earn, or that they have rank that they didn't deserve, or what have you. They try to make themselves, especially with as much fame and reputation as goes with Steven Seagal's Aikido lineage. I mean, anybody would want to see value attaching themselves to that if they thought they could get students from it, or somehow increase their own.
Yeah, but absolutely, but the proof is in the pudding, though.
Absolutely,
you know what I'm saying? You can sit there, I don't give a shit what your rank says. People don't punch your belt, they punch your face. I've made that statement, I don't know, 24 times over the last 5 years. It's real simple. If you can't do basic Tenshin Aikido, and I'm just going to use the word Tenshin Aikido to describe the methodology of Steven Seagal's Aikido. If you can't do Tenshin Aikido basics, you can't do the fundamentals the way how we do it. The way how it was handed down to me from Renosu Sensei, Matsuoka Sensei, and especially George Angulo, then you really don't have a leg to stand on. So if you want to sit there and say that you're a Tenshin Aikido instructor, okay, produce the video of the Don test that you took under any of the instructors that I named. And when you can't do that, and there's nobody there that can sit there and say, yeah, I was there, I watched him take the test, you're full of shit.
Sure.
Okay, I put mine up. Okay, Larry Reynosa promoted me to Nidan. George Angulo promoted me to the next 3 ranks after that. Okay, so anybody wants to contest my rank as a 5th Dan, feel free and contact George Angulo. He's in Miami, Florida. Okay, you can contact him through Instagram. You can contact him through Facebook. He owns a personal training business. So a little shout out to Garage Incorporated. That's out in South Miami. Contact him. He'll be the first one to tell you that I'm about as legit as it comes. Sure.
I don't think anybody would be challenging your rank or your lineage. And I think that in Idan's question about Tenshin Aikido, I think you get a snapshot of what Tenshin is right now. I've got some questions about what it could be in the future, what possibilities there are based on what's going on now. But also let's look back to the past, which is some of the commonly held beliefs about Steven Seagal, which are accurate and which are not accurate. One of the big ones that always comes up with the claim is that he was the first non-Japanese allowed to open a dojo in Japan. And I know we talked a little about this in the pre-interview, but as I understand it, wasn't he dating a daughter of an Aikido instructor over there that had a dojo, and he trained there and then kind of inherited? Do you know that story at all?
Yeah, I know a little bit about that story.
Okay.
From what I've been told and from what I know, okay, Miyako Fujitani was his first wife, and he had 2 kids with her. And he basically, my understanding is he met her at a seminar, I believe it was in California, and somehow, some way, he got the means to fly to Osaka, Japan, and seek her out. And obviously, he had a thing for her, and that's just how things go. You have an attraction towards somebody, especially if they're from another country and he's doing the same martial art that she's doing. And ironically, Miyako Fujitani actually outranked Steven Seagal at the time. He was a Shodan and she was a Nidan. Obviously gained entrance into the dojo. Then, one thing led to another. They ended up getting married. And the dojo, from my understanding, the Osaka Tenshin Dojo, that's where Tenshin comes from. Tenshin Aikido comes from the name of the dojo, the Osaka Tenshin Dojo. So it's Tenshin Dojo, not Tenshin Aikido, Tenshin Dojo. The dojo was doing extremely poorly from my understanding. So he talked to Miyako Fujitani's father, who is an Aikido instructor and owned the Osaka Dojo, and he convinced him that he can turn around the school being the chief instructor. And so he did. A lot of that, when he was in Japan, he didn't, I think he might have, I heard rumors that he might have taught it, in English class, Japan. I think a lot of foreigners do that go to Japan. That's how they find work, because they teach English to Japanese people, to make money. But Steven Seagal, from what I've been told, he spent a lot of time training with high-end Aikido instructors, and one of them, a very prominent Shihan directly under O-Sensei, was Hiroshi Isoyama. Isoyama is a monster. I mean, the way how this guy throws people, it's just brutal. I mean, he slams people left and right. You can clearly see where Seagal gets his Ariminage from. It's from him. He's obviously made adjustments to the way how Isoyama taught him versus the way how he actually does it. There's not a lot of hand deflections that are involved in Isoyama's Aikido because I really haven't seen any. I haven't seen like the Tsuriyage, the Ukanagashis, Sotogiri, things like that. He does Kotegiri where you're cutting the wrist from being grabbed, which we do, and that's still done very heavily in Seagal's methodology of Aikido. So he trained with Isoyama. He trained with a couple other people, and I believe you can find a video on YouTube of Christian Tissier talking about Steven Seagal getting a fifth on, and at one point, I guess, the rumor has it Seagal went from Shodan to Godan, like in one promotion. How that was pulled off, I don't know. Was he the only Westerner that opened up, that was the first non-Japanese person to open up an Aikido school? He didn't open up the Aikido school. He opened up no Aikido school. He just took over an existing Aikido school and became the chief instructor. That's what that story is.
Okay.
If it's any different, then Seagal Sensei needs to make a video of his own and tell people what the truth is and actually be honest about it and don't bullshit, because there's a lot of stuff out there that Steven Seagal talks about, which is, you can look up online and you can clearly see that it's not accurate.
Sure.
It's almost, a lot of things are embellished.
And that's what brings me up, actually, to Idan's original question. Said a lot of hate that seems to be directed towards Steven Seagal by the Aikido community. And my own personal feeling on this is that, there's kind of Steven Seagal, the Aikido instructor, and then Steven Seagal, the actor, and kind of Steven Seagal, then the man, the personality. And there are a lot of crossover with the rumors. Some people don't like his acting, which, that's could be a valid criticism. And then kind of the things that you talked about, some of the scandals, the disputes about who said what to who, or who did what. There are a lot of actors and personalities that said, yeah, I worked with Steven Seagal and I wouldn't want to do it again, and all those kinds of things. And I think that reputation has got a large part to do with why Aikido practitioners, or even just people in general, might look at him with kind of a furrowed brow and there's not really much good I like about this guy, as being part of it.
That's now, though, correct?
What's that?
That would be now, because there's, that
right.
People that, like, people in the past didn't like Steven Seagal, but more so now with social media being huge compared to what it was 20 years ago, non-existent.
Yep. Indeed. In fact, I just ran across a comment just today. Somebody posted up and said, I was a huge Seagal fan until I learned more about his personality. I think if you were encapsulate it down to one sentence, that was a really good description of, hearing about some of the things that he was involved in, or some of the things he said, or things that he claimed that were disproven, or, things that were accusations made against him that he then came and denied, and a lot of stories. And I don't want to dig too much deep into that, because anybody can go on YouTube or Google, into that. They can dig into all the scuttlebutt and the rumors. But I think that in the end, when there's a lot of smoke, people start to think, well, maybe there's some fire there. And there does seem to be a lack of people that can come out and say, I worked with Steven Seagal for years and he's a great guy. He would do anything for you. There just seems to be a lack of that, and a lot more of, I met him and he was kind of a jackass sort of opinions. So I've never met him. I don't know. But, if I had to bet a paycheck on it, I would lean one way rather than the other. So I just wanted to put that out there.
I've met him. I've met Steven Seagal. I've never trained with him personally.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of accusations that I'm not going to go into, but like you said, you can Google Steven Seagal's name, and I'm sure all the dirt's going to come up. Whether or not that stuff is true or it's been unfounded or whatever, that's neither here nor there, and it's really none of our business.
Exactly.
It's whatever he did and whatever people accused him of doing or whatnot. That's just, it is what it is. You know what I'm saying? But when it comes down to his Aikido ability, it's funny because when I first started training in Aikido, I trained in a traditional dojo. I trained at Chicago Aikikai directly under Kevin Shote Sensei, who was a direct student of Sudi Satomi's for a very, very long time. I remember like it was yesterday, bringing up Steven Seagal's name to Kevin Show Sensei, and Kevin Show Sensei just rolled his eyes at me and gave me this look, and I'm like, do you not like him?
Mm-hmm.
And he just kind of just sat there, and I'm like, well, what do you think of his Aikido? And he really never gave me solid answers to why he likes him or not like him. But I got the impression that what Steven Seagal was showing on the silver screen was more like Hollywood style Aikido, which in reality it's not. That's exactly what he does. Because if anybody has seen the documentary on Steven Seagal, Path Beyond Thought, you'll see vintage film of him in the 70s doing Iri Minage and Naroskiage and Kotogaishi and Rakdori and all different types of techniques that he does in his movies way before he was ever a movie star.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the style of Aikido that he was teaching. You know, was he an innovator of Aikido? I would have to say yes to a certain degree, because the methodology that I understand was, it was about having a practical form of Aikido. You can take the dance form, which is the traditional stuff, and this is more along the lines of a quote that Craig Dunn said at Path Beyond Thought. You can take the dance form and you can dance with it. But if you have to take that dance form and you have to use it practically, you're going to be a little disappointed.
Sure.
Because if you don't know how to use something practically and you just know the dance form of it, and then using the dance form is a lack of better words, like the softer style, or, the love, peace, and harmony style of Aikido, and you got to turn that into something brutal to defend yourself or defend somebody else or your loved ones or whatever. If you don't know how to do that, you're going to get smashed.
Mm-hmm.
And the majority of guys that I've trained over the years and guys that I know that are actually legit Tenshin Aikido guys, they can do Tenshin Aikido and they can go into a traditional dojo, no problem. And they can follow along and do what the traditional people do as well. But you can't take a traditional guy and put him in a Tenshin dojo and have them do what we do on the first day.
Sure.
There's no way. Because there's way too many intricacies with hand deflections. And it's funny because, I've heard comments of Steven Seagal saying there's not that much difference in what I do compared to what everybody else does. And, but I beg to differ with that to a very extreme level, because Naroskiage is done a very particular way. And I've seen people attempt to do that, and it looks nothing like what we do.
Sure.
Kouzudori Nikyo is an extremely powerful way in how we do it. And I see a lot of people doing it wrong all the time. The footwork is different. Hand deflections, are one of our major training principles is not get punched, grabbed, kicked, or taken to the ground. The only way you achieve that is through hand deflections by deflecting somebody's attack. There is no deflections in any other style of Aikido. And again, I don't really give a fuck what anyone has to say about that, because I've heard tons of people say, we do hand deflections here, or we do your ass you do. Okay? Because I've seen those other systems. I'm not just some guy that's walked around the block once. I've been around the block several times. And I've yet to see an Aikido style out there, whether it's Aikikai, Yoshinkan, Iwama, Seidokan, whatever, Tomiki. I've yet to see any other style other than Tenshin Aikido use hand deflections.
We talked a little about what the influences that Seagal had, and obviously the harder style wasn't his own invention. He actually worked with other instructors that did that. It's my understanding that Seagal at some point crossed paths with, I think it was an Iaido or a sword style. Yeah, and got exposed to Kenjutsu, got exposed to those deflections that were sword applicable, and he saw great value in it, and he decided to kind of adopt those into empty hand. Is that accurate?
Yes.
Okay.
Absolutely. That is 100% accurate. And the one thing that I find a huge kick out of is when I get people that comment on my videos saying, oh, that's Tung Sao and that's Bung Sao from Wing Chun. Or somebody goes, those are the same hand deflections, the same hand movements that's used in Silat. We got news for you. No, they're not. They're nowhere near the same. They're not the same. But people say, that's the same thing as Wing Chun. That's the same thing as Silat. That's the same thing as it. No, it's not. It's not. Those are actual sword deflections from Kenjutsu. Okay? There's, Kendo, there's Aikiken, there's Kenjutsu, there's Iai-Jitsu, there's Iaido. Jitsu means practical application of battlefield technique. Kenjutsu is practical application of the sword. So when you're doing sword deflections, ukanagashi, suriage, things like that. He was able to take those sword deflections, remove the sword, incorporate them into empty hand, and use them as a means to fend off being punch, grab, kicked, or taken to the ground. So it's all based off of the Japanese kenjutsu system, which it doesn't seem like anybody knows what was the actual style. Matsuoka Sensei might know, but he's not talking about it. I've asked George Angulo about it, and Angulo Sensei says, yeah, he's okay, which means Grandmaster. He was actually he was handed the lineage of this particular kenjutsu system, and nobody seems to know what style it is or what form of kenjutsu it is. And, ukanagashi is nothing new when it comes to sword work. I mean, it's in every sword system. It's in medieval sword work. Yeah. It's not just in Japanese, kenjutsu. It's a deflection that's, universal. It's used across the board in a lot of other swords.
Swords are swords all over the world throughout history. I mean, they've got some variations and a little bit of differences here and there, but by and large, the principles are all the same. Yeah,
very much so, yeah. But the hand deflections, he completely innovated that. I mean, there's with the exception of Kiriage. Kiriage is my creation. The AKA bitch slap, I touched it the last time you were out here.
Right, yep.
That is something that I developed on my own from a kenjutsu system that I was training in. I saw value in it, and it's in 90% of the stuff that I do when it comes to hand deflections, because it's a fast application, and it helps with the second deflection. That you could do. So they're very practical. They work extremely well. They definitely fit with the principles of don't get punch, grab, kicked, or taken down on the ground. It's an interesting concept. It's an interesting thing to add to your Aikido training. And and for the life of me, I don't understand why more and more people are not adopting these hand deflections into their Aikido. Because, people think that they can catch a punch out of the air.
Which is absurd.
That's absurd. Yeah. People need to wake up. This is 2019. Yeah. If you think any joint locks are going to work off of striking,
well, and that's the thing. When you practice it slowly, you can get away with things you cannot get away with at speed. And so you get seduced into this belief of, I can snatch a punch out of the air, and then you practice it for years, and now you believe it, but it's still not true.
And that's the thing with joint locks. It's Kotagaishi, Nikyo, Sankyo, Hiji Shime. It's a lot of people. It's the way of the methodology of Aikido is taught. It's taught attack and defend, attack and defend. When you do like Munetsuki, Kotagaishi, if you think for 1 second somebody's going to punch you like that and follow along with you to be able, and then for them to be able to apply Kotagaishi, you keep telling yourself that. I hope it makes you sleep better at night, because that's complete bullshit. It's when chaos breaks out and violence is erupted and somebody's throwing 10 punches at you within a matter of a second, you're never going to get a joint lock off of any strike. Whether it's a showman.
Joint locks really are secondary tools. They're not primary tools. And when I watch Tamiki, oh boy, we're kind of getting a little off track, but I'll just mention, when I see Tamiki, the Brandori, or the competitions they do, it's pretty clear that they've made joint locks as their primary, the first thing you're trying to do. And that's, to me, why it tends to look so strange. Like, this doesn't look like judo or wrestling or any other competitive combat, because they're overlooking all the other stuff that happens. Like, a joint lock is a backup of what happens when you get into a messed up position and you have an opportunity, but not because you led off with it. Kind of like a boxer would never lead off with an uppercut, because that's an opportunity type of a shot. You only take it once other things have happened and you see that you have that opportunity. Anyway, go ahead.
Mistake that, they don't get that. And this is something that I've been meaning to talk about for a while, so I'm just taking this opportunity to address that. Is just that, joint applications, small joint applications will never, okay, I'm going to repeat this, and this might be a shock to some of the listeners here, will never work against somebody that's trying to punch you with the intent to smash your face. Because they're going to punch, they're going to retract, they're going to punch you with the other hand, they're going to retract, They're going to punch you with the other hand. They're going to retract. It's going to be fast. It's going to be explosive, and it's going to hurt if it connects. You're never going to be able to pull off a joint lock when it comes down to those terms. Joint locks are used for control purposes, pain compliance purposes. Extremely useful for law enforcement. Extremely useful for security details. Because usually when you're dealing with somebody from a law enforcement capacity, it's not an all-out brawl. If you have to put somebody in handcuffs and they start resisting, that's when these joint locks come into play.
Mm-hmm. That's a good point.
That's when they work the most effective. Now, do I teach them? Do I teach joint locks from punching aspects? Yeah, I do. But here's the thing. Like you said, it's not a primary. It's a secondary thing. You have to set up the technique with something else. Hand deflection, attend me to the face. Hand deflection, attend me to the body. Something that's going to break their focus and concentration and their goal to inflict bodily harm on you. Then you go in for the secondary move, which would be a wrist lock control technique or an elbow lock of some sort or a choking technique or some sort, anything of that.
Sure.
But to be able to pull that stuff off of right from the jump from a punch, you're going to get hit.
Yeah, that's very true.
Especially if you don't have hand deflections deployed. If you can't do hand deflections and you're trying to catch us out of the air, I hope you got a good dental plan because you're going to be getting implants.
That's a good point.
Your teeth knocked out.
Yep, that's very true. So let's jump back onto track. And you mentioned this very briefly, but I did want to ask, because I think a lot of people are curious about this, is that how long did Steven Seagal teach Aikido in the U.S. before he started in action movies? And then when he started getting into the movies, did he continue teaching or staying active at all, or did he kind of go semi-retire or sort of drift off into his career?
Okay, that's a good question. I kind of mentioned this a couple minutes ago. Steven Seagal had a student. His name was Michael Ovitz, and Michael Ovitz at the time was the agent to be hooked up with. If you were a movie star, Michael Ovitz was your agent. Mm-hmm. He was a very powerful man in Hollywood. I don't even know if the guy's still alive. He was a student of Steven Seagal's, and at one point, I guess Matsuoka Sensei was traveling to this man's house. I think the guy lived off of like Mulholland Drive, something like that, and was personally training this guy, doing private lessons with him. He saw value in Steven Seagal's teaching and basically set up a screen test for Warner Brothers or whatever, and the rest was history. Obviously, he became a movie star. But from what I was told, from what I heard, Steven Seagal pretty much retired from being an active Aikido instructor in 1985. Steven Seagal didn't make it big until 1988. So he was pursuing it, but finally got a big break. But the dojo, the chief instructor was Matsuoka from 1985 until 1997. And then Matsuoka, for whatever reason, left and went back to Japan. I cannot elaborate on that story because I don't know the details of why he left Seagal.
Okay.
Not 100% sure exactly the reason why. It's never really been talked about the reason why. It just happened. He has no longer a connection with Larry Reynosa, hasn't had a connection with Reynosa since 2000. So it's just one of those things. So my understanding is he stopped teaching professionally in 1985 to pursue a movie career. Now, did he continue on teaching after he became famous? Yeah. From what I know, yes, he did. It just wasn't as often because that wasn't his primary focus in life anymore. His primary focus in life was a movie star, being an actor. So obviously he was pursuing that more. Now, did he train with his senior guys? I believe he did. I don't think it was on a regular basis. It's whenever he was in town and had time to do it. There were seminars from Larry Reynosa Sensei shared with me. He produced 13 seminars with Steven Seagal, and not a lot, but clips of the seminar footage were actually put in documentary Paths Beyond Thought. You're talking Ventura County College. He held a couple seminars there. He had a seminar at his Montana ranch. I think he had another seminar at another ranch that he has in California. I think he had a couple in California at one time, or he had one, sold it, and then had another one. Some of that footage is actually seen in Path Beyond Thought as well. But 13 seminars of an Aikido instructor that not a lot of people knew about until he became famous. And these, you got to remember, social media wasn't around, so it's like you're not going to be seeing, seminar flyers on Facebook because Facebook didn't exist. So this is kind of like an insider thing. You needed to know somebody to know that this was happening. Otherwise there's no way of getting the information out to tell people that there were seminars being held with Seagal Sensei back when Seagal Sensei was still in his primes. Because you couldn't get the word out. Put an ad in the newspaper, hey, Steven Seagal seminar. They didn't do that.
Right.
So it was word of mouth type of thing. And, if you knew somebody that knew about it, then there was a really good chance that you were going to go, or that you could go. But, I've had conversations with George Angulo Sensei about this. There's guys, like I said, there's guys out there that claim to be students of Steven Seagal's or claim to have been students of Steven Seagal's. And they only trained with Seagal once or twice for a couple hours in his backyard at his Brentwood home when he had a home in California. Mm-hmm. What type of training do you think you're going to get from a guy that's a movie star that comes out for 15, 20 minutes, demonstrates the technique, then walks back inside and sits in his house for 3 hours and comes back out and you guys are still doing the same technique? I'd be pissed. If that was me, I travel all the way from Chicago to sit outside in your fucking backyard for 3 hours while you're eating Haagen-Dazs ice cream and you don't want to come out and teach anything else until you're ready because now you're sitting on your high and mighty throne as being an actor. That's bullshit.
Isn't that kind of the rumor or kind of how things seem to go when those seminars tended to happen? Is that kind of how?
Well, the seminars, the ones that were held, that were actually events, were held at colleges and stuff, those were different.
Oh, okay.
He was there front and center. But any type of, these guys that claim to be direct students of his, how much mat time did you really get with Steven Seagal?
Right.
But they post all over their websites how they were direct students of his for 10 years. Okay, how many times have you trained with Steven Seagal in 10 years?
Mm-hmm.
How many hours of training did you log down with him? I'm willing to bet it's only a couple hours per person.
Mm-hmm.
Because, think about it. Have you ever been to a Satomi Sensei seminar?
I have not, no.
Okay. How about Ikeda? Who have you been to?
I've done Ikeda a couple of times, Yamada once,
okay.
Just a couple, but none of which I would ever claim I was a student of, just because, you get in one student, one class.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
So if you train with Ikeda Sensei, say 3 seminars, does that make you a direct student of Ikeda Sensei?
Oh, heck no. Not even close.
No, it doesn't make you a direct student of his.
No.
Some of these jackasses out there that claim to be direct students of Steven Seagal's did one class with Steven Seagal, and Steven Seagal accepted them.
Right.
Said, you're my personal student. So they take that and they run with it. I'm a direct student of Steven Seagal's. Okay, does anybody ever question you? And how many times you train? How many times do you train with Steven Seagal all the time? God, that must have been such an amazing thing to be able to learn from Steven Seagal. I am so jealous. Do they ask, how many times did you actually train with him? No, they don't ask because they automatically assume that it was all the time. But it really wasn't. It was once or twice over the course of 10 fucking years.
Right.
How can you sit there and say that you're a direct student of his?
Mm-hmm.
Especially if you've gotten 0 rank from him, you've never taken a Don test and been promoted? Because that's technically, when somebody, and I look at, my Shodan came from Satomi, but I don't claim to be a direct student of Satomi Sensei's because he promoted me to Shodan. I was being promoted because Kevin Shote Sensei had to go through the protocol of Satomi Sensei to test me for Shodan. That's just the way how things work in organizations, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I never claimed to be a direct student of Satomi Sensei, but I was a part of that organization. I was a direct student of Kevin Shote Sensei, but Satomi Sensei awarded me the Shodan. I was a direct student of Larry Reynosas, and I got promoted by him. I was a direct student. I am a direct student of George Angulo, and I've been promoted by him. Mm-hmm. But these guys that have trained with Steven Seagal, a couple times, and all of a sudden, abracadabra, they're 6 Dans, and it's all over their websites. Oh, I was a direct student of Steven Seagal. I'm a Rokudan, 6 Dan, and Aikido, blah, blah. Bullshit.
Mm-hmm.
Bullshit. You're just sensationalizing your fucking lie. That's all that you're doing. And people know about me. I don't like to fucking lie about shit. I don't lie about shit.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to call anybody out when I see fit. And this is, like I said, I'm not going to mention names because I can embarrass a lot of people out there. Mm-hmm. And I won't.
Mm-hmm.
I won't do that. Because if these guys are listening to this, and they're scratching their heads going, oh, I wonder who Lenny's talking about. I'm talking about you, jackass. That's what I'm talking about. That's what I'm talking about.
Well, that kind of brings us to sort of the state of what Tenshin Aikido is today. Like, and I've heard some rumors that Seagal right now is over in Russia. Well, it's not a rumor, it is, but that he's there, and the rumor is that he's trying to kind of get back into the Aikido world a little bit. I've seen some online videos of, I guess, a demonstration that he did, or some kind of a seminar or something that he did over in Russia fairly recently.
Last October.
I'm sorry, say that again?
That happened last October.
Was it? Okay.
It was called the Budo Festival. He's been appointed the Shihan of the Russian Aikido Federation. He's been appointed the Shihan of that. And these guys are traditional Aikido people. These are like Aikikai people. But he's been promoted, or he's been put in position of the chief instructor, the main Shihan of this organization, which is fine. Okay, but how much time is he dedicating to these people?
Yeah, that I've not heard anything about.
Here's the thing. I don't really want to talk a lot of mad shit about Seagal, because there's a lot of stuff that I can say that would be very disappointing to a lot of people, and this is actual stuff that I know that is true, that has been founded to be true. Okay, so I'm not going to go into that.
We can keep it classy. I'm totally fine with that. So
yeah, I don't want to go off the end and tell people the stuff that I know that isn't going to paint a pretty nice picture. I admire Steven Seagal for his Aikido. I respect Steven Seagal for his Aikido, but when it comes to other things, that's a whole other topic. Okay, but what he's doing right now is, being the chief instructor of this Russian Aikido Federation. How much time is he spending over there with those students? Probably not a lot, because he's pretty busy promoting, movies going straight to DVD. Nothing's, ending up in Warner Brothers or Sony Pictures or on a silver screen. Everything's going straight to DVD, or it's being streamed. He's not making any mainstream movies. He's not well liked in Hollywood, so he has his own production company, and this is how he's doing this, and this is how he's making money doing it. God bless him. Make as much money as you possibly can. Why is he coming back to the Aikido world? I don't know. It's kind of like, full circle. That's how he started off. He was hardcore badass in Aikido, and he hit the silver screen, and he took the world by storm, and he kicked ass and take names, and then unfortunately his movie career pretty much tanked. And now it's coming back around full circle, and he's I don't know, maybe he's trying to reinvent himself and get back into Aikido because he feels the need to do that. And if he does, then, God bless him. I wish him the best of luck. He's obviously not going to be the same Steven Seagal that we saw in, 1988, 89, 90, 91, 92. You get older, can't move as fast. You're not as sharp as you used to be. You packed on a few pounds. It happens to all of us, I guess. I mean, it hasn't happened to me yet, and I'm almost 49, so I guess I'm blessed with that, ability.
Well, and Seagal is what, in his 60s?
67.
60, yeah, he's almost 70 years old. And I mean, his movies really made Aikido recognizable back in, the early 90s or late 80s. I just wonder, would his reemergence into the Aikido community, or into the movies again, if he broke out with not just DVD, going straight to DVD movies, but had another blockbuster, would that make Aikido popular again? Or maybe a younger actor, a new one that came in that would showcase what Aikido was, in a movie that was made sometime, fairly recently. Because as I understand it, some of his recent movies, like in the last 15 years, really didn't have much Aikido in it compared to what was shown in the first, 4 or 5 movies that he released.
Yeah, well, part of the problem with that, too, is I don't know how many people know about this, but I've talked about this before in the past, but obviously this is pretty relevant for what we're talking about right now. Maybe a lot of people know this, maybe a lot of people don't know this. All the stunt guys in the fight scenes for everything that was produced by Warner Brothers was Steven Seagal Sensei's direct students. He didn't use stunt people. He used his actual students. Matsuoka Sensei, Larry Reynolds, Craig Dunn, Vin Dang, Stevie Palmer, Carlos Gonzalez, Luis Silva. Okay? He used those guys in all the fight scenes. Why? Because they all know how to move. They all know which direction he's going. They know how to take you coming from that and make it very dynamic looking. You couldn't teach a stunt guy what those guys already knew. So from a production standpoint, can you imagine how much money he saved, you know, the producer of that movie, just for the fact that he had guys that already knew how to do this? So rehearsal time for fight scenes were probably very short. And then they went right to live and filmed it because these guys knew exactly how to move. Mm-hmm. You got to teach a stunt guy how to take, you know, an Urimi Nage break fall. That's not an easy thing to learn. It's a hard thing to learn.
And you miss that once, and you're going to be recovering for a couple of days.
Yeah, and if you already know how to do it, you can do it on concrete. You can do it on a hard surface. You don't need to have mats because you know how to fall. Is it going to hurt? Yeah, it's going to hurt. But how bad is it going to hurt versus somebody that doesn't know how to fall like that and has not fallen like that for 15, 20 years? Mm-hmm. Stunt guy or no stunt guy, you know, that's going to leave a mark. Oh, yeah. You know, it's going to hurt. So he used all of his students for the fight scenes. And then obviously he parted ways with all of them except for Ben Dang, from what I know, because Ben Dang was actually a movie producer in a lot of his straight-to-DVD movies. If you look at the credits, he was a movie producer. You know, so he lost touch with those people. You know, Stevie Palmer, I don't even know if he's still around. Carlos Gonzalez, last time I heard, is still directly under Matsuoka Sensei. Craig Dunn is directly under Matsuoka Sensei. Luis Silva is directly under Matsuoka Sensei. Larry Reynosa is completely on his own. He has no connection with any of those people anymore.
This is the end of part 1 of the interview. Part 2 will be released in a couple of days, which has more great information and an exciting announcement. Stay tuned. What other topics are you interested in hearing covered in this podcast? Please share your ideas in the comments if you are watching this on YouTube, or go to the Facebook group Aikido the Martial Side and post a comment. You can also support this podcast by donating either through a monthly sponsorship or a single donation of any amount you like. I always enjoy hearing from the listeners of the show, whether through comments or questions. Thank you all for sharing your interest. Enjoy your training.